Hey there, y'all. Good morning. I am back at the beach, but I'm probably not going to spend too much time out here because the weather is not great. Some angry, angry clouds behind me. And yet, there are people out frolicking. You go, people. It's all fun and games to get hit by lightning. There doesn't seem to be any lightning right now, though, so they should be okay. So today I'm going to talk about overeating and why this is so irresistible for us, why it's so difficult, and maybe a little bit about what to do about it. So if you kind of think about the history of humanity, there have, as far as I know, I'm not a great historian, but many, many times throughout our history, and I would guess it was more often the case than not, there have been problems of food insecurity, right? Of maybe you couldn't get the food you really liked, you had to eat what was available, or there were famines, right? Certainly there were times throughout history when maybe some of our ancestors starved to death or relatives starved to death. So lack of food has been an issue for many, many generations, even up to probably our grandparents' time. I was reading, now it was historical fiction, but I think this part was more the history part than the fiction part. I was reading a book about when they were discovering penicillin. So this would have been like during my grandparents' time. And they were talking about World War II and rations, right? That they were rationing foods. You would get your ration card. You could only get so much. So these were the people who raised our parents. So a lot of things our parents said to us about food would have been things that their parents said to them, which made sense in the context of rationing and only so much food being available and not knowing where things were going to come from. They were talking in this book about going to visit this rich dude, and he had coffee and he had lots of sugar, and this was big excitement. So as recently as the parents of our parents, food shortages and food scarcity were a thing. Now, there are some people our age that grew up with not enough food in the house. But my guess is that was probably more the exception than the rule. I think most people, I'm Gen X, most people our age, I think we had food in the house. It might not have been what we liked. It might not have been what we would have bought for ourselves. But for most of us, there was food available. Not everybody. But most of us had enough to eat most of the time. So we may actually be the first generation which as a whole is dealing with the problem of too much food rather than not enough food. And again, certainly in the past, there were exceptions. You look at some of the portraits of kings, and they were not keto, right? Some of these kings had abundance in front of them, and they did with it exactly what we have done. But I think for the whole of humanity, or at least, Western civilization, Americans, Europeans, for most of the people that are watching this, we may well be the first generation to have such free access to food. So it makes sense that everything in the primitive part of our brain is wired to, I want that, give it to me, I need that, and that our parents gave us all this indoctrination about, eat what's on your plate. There are starving children in Africa. I was always like, if there are starving children in Africa, can we package up these peas and send them over there? Because I don't want them. That argument didn't go over very well. But we may well be the first generation of humans that, as a whole, are spending more time dealing with the problem of abundance, too much food, than the problem of scarcity, not enough food. So it makes sense that we don't, as a people, know how to deal with this. And then you throw in on top of that the challenge of factory food where scientists sit around and engineer it specifically to be as craveable as possible, to be the least amount filling as possible. They want you to eat as much of it as possible because that's how they make the most profits. That's how they keep you addicted. If you eat chips and you never feel full, then you're going to eat a lot more chips than if they were high fiber. So, this is a problem. If your weight is not where you want it to be, that you do need to deal with. It is something I can help you with. But, give yourself a little grace. It makes sense that we don't know how to deal with this problem. It's probably the first generation on the whole that's dealing with it. So speaking of, breakfast is already served. Talk to you later. Bye.